All right, good morning, Rabbi. So let's continue Be'ez Hashem, part 3. I think we're holding in the Sugya of Ksiva. I'd just like to welcome back our dear Eli Weinberg, who's Baruch Hashem come back to Yeshiva. Wow. It's great, it's really gewaldig when the married boys Baruch Hashem are married and they come back, they still come back, as we always say, they always come back, which is gewaldig. Let us continue, Rabbi Sai. So today we have a new Sugya in Ksiva, which is not talking about the actual writing, but now we're moving on. What happens if the letter or shape or name or whatever it may be that we're dealing with is already written? So we're not dealing with an actual shaila of writing, but rather over here we're dealing with the shaila of connecting two letters, right? We know, Gemara tells us this, that in order to be chayav ksiva, you have to write two letters. That we're not discussing at this moment of time. But in order to have a word, you generally need more than one letter. So if that's the case, what is the din? If I have pre-existing letters and I place them together, I connect them together to form a new word, is that considered akiva to be writing? Or do we say it's already written, and therefore if it's already written, there's no shaila? That is the shaila of today. We begin with a Gemara in Shabbos, Kuf Daled Amud Beis, where the Gemara tells us azoi. The Gemara says, what happens if a person writes one letter in Tiveria? Okay, so he's writing one letter in Tiveria, and then he goes all the way to Tzipori, and he writes another letter. So he Maisa wrote two letters on Shabbos. Shabbos Kodesh, he wrote two letters. But Yitzi, one was all the way in Tiveria, and the other one was all the way in Tzipori. What is the din of writing a minimum of two letters when they're not together? One over there. In other words, just to make it simple, even though we can darshan this in the Rishonim, talk about this that we're not going into. Imagine if someone chas v'sham la'aleinu la'alechem was writing on Shabbos Kodesh, and he, in order to be chayiv the doraisa, he knows, in other words, he's looking to get skila. That's what he's looking for. He's looking to get chayiv skila. He wants to write two letters. So what does he do? He goes to one wall and he writes over there. An aleph, and he writes on the other wall over there. He writes a gimel, whatever. He wrote two letters. Shiloh, you have to read them together, you don't have to read them together. I don't want to go now into the sugya now of that Gemara because we're not talking about actual writing. But I just want to talk. Say that, so the Gemara talks about whether or not it has to be read together, bag, bab, whatever the Gemara goes through the whole sugya. We're not talking about that because we're not talking about writing. Now I'm talking about the fact that if they're not together, is that considered to be ksiva or not? That's the kasha. So the Gemara says clearly, when you write two letters, you are chayiv. They're not together. Who cares? Sounds like Mechusa Kreva, right? The fact that they're not together is not a chesorin, which means the fact that I wrote two letters, that's the issa. They have no shaykhos. One is in Tiveria, one is in Tzipori. Too bad. You're still chayiv ksiva. What does that tell me? What do we learn from that Gemara Gershon? So I'll tell you what we learn from the Gemara. We learn from the Gemara that when I take two pre-existing letters, Yida, are you with me? Take two pre-existing letters and put them together, I didn't accomplish anything. I didn't do anything. What's the raya? Ilan, you with me? It's very important to understand the raya over here. You're going to be at a Shabbos meal, you're going to tell them what you heard and share, and they're going to start challenging you. Right? Depends how yeshivish they are. Okay, whatever. Depends on, if they know some halacha or not. Whatever. But let's say they start challenging you. You have to know what to say, right? What are you going to tell them? So you can tell, what do you mean? Gemara and Shabbos. No, we don't learn that because it's not Yeshiva Shem Masechta. Like it's, Kuf Dalet. We never got there because we only did the first three blat in the Masechta. But I'll call him. What are you going to say? Very simple. The Gemara says that when you write two letters and you didn't put them together, you're still chayiv. Why? Because putting them together, Ari, is not the Melocho. Which sounds like that whenever I have two pre-existing letters and I place them next to each other, the halacha is that is not considered to be ksiva. And that lemaisa is what the gedolim, the achronim, rishonim, and poiskim la'halacha lemaisa hold in this case. If you look at the Taz, Nechaim Simon Shin Mem, the Taz is very clear that taking two pre-existing letters and place them close to each other is not ksiva. I didn't do anything. It's already written. And that's the psak of the Taz, the Maimamodcha, the Avnei Neza, the Hilchos Yaakov, Reb Moshe and Shuvas, Reb Shlomo Zalman, Reb Elyashiv, and many, many others, of course, as well. So therefore, according to that, For example, just to make it simple, if I have a card with a bunch of letters on it, and I take it to form a word, I want to tell someone in the morning that I've gone to a certain kiddush, meet me there, and I have a stack of cards with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever, and I form words on it, I put it on the counter, no problem. I made words, again, pre-existing, mutter, no problem. However, before we move on with the examples, let me give you the however. Okay, Asa, you with me? There's a Magen Avraham, very important Magen Avraham. The Magen Avraham says, what happens if you take a letter, a 3D letter, and you attach it, and Melocho in the Magen Avraham is onto the Paroiches. So I have a 3D letter. How do I attach it is a different shaila. I don't know. Let's pretend that we don't know how he's attaching it. Okay? I attach it, this pre-existing 3D cut-out letter. Put it onto the Paroiches. The Magen Avraham says, the Shulchan Aruch, the Heilige Balatanya, passing this way, the Magen Avraham says that's considered to be ksiva. Why? Again, the Makor is the Magen Avraham. The Mishabur brings it Halach and Amaisa. Shulchan Aruch paskins this way. The Kaf HaChaim paskins this way. Why? What do you mean? It's pre-existing. What did I do? I thought pre-existing letters you could do whatever you want. Zuk the Magen Avraham, no. Why? Because Vidov, when you have something that has no backing to it and you give it a backing, right, Yankela, that's ksiva. So when you have a pre-existing letter that's there, it's in its form, it's already written, but I give it a backing, that's ksiva. That's the Magen Avraham. So now let's go back to our shilas and talk some halacha and ma'aser examples. If I have a bunch of cards, as we said, with aleph base ABC on it, and I line them up to form words, there is no problem with that on Shabbos Kodesh. We mentioned yesterday a combination lock. Obviously, no problem whatsoever. The letters are already there. There's no shaila with that whatsoever. Dominoes, for example, not that there's any words there, but theoretically, dominoes, there'd be no problem whatsoever in that case. What about Scrabble? How does Scrabble... Yankela, what was the name again? Bananagrams, whatever that is. I don't know what that is, but it's the same thing as Scrabble, right? It's the same thing as Scrabble. 1 second, I have a kasha. Bananagrams, you write with it or you don't write with it? Meaning normally you write down scores or not? No. You don't write. Oh, very good. Okay, so now Rabbi, we have a big chiluk. Scrabble, I haven't done this in years, right? I didn't play Scrabble. Yeah? You write things down sometimes. You can write down scores and stuff. You keep, yeah, you do, right? Shimon says, no, I don't know on Shabbos. But Shimon says, about during the week when he plays Scrabble, then he will. So 1 second, Rabbi, so we have a big kash over here. Zug with Moshe and Shuva. Playing Scrabble, no problem. Why? Again, I've got cards, right? Tiles. Every tile has a letter. I'm putting the letters next to each other to form words. No issa. Connecting words that are pre-existing on a background, no problem. I have no problem with that whatsoever. Zug with Moshe, deluxe Scrabble, that's Osa. What's the chiluk between, says Zevi, regular Scrabble and deluxe Scrabble? So I guess you're not a Baki in Scrabble. But those that are a Baki in Scrabble know that deluxe Scrabble has a board with grooves in it, and you're placing it in the groove. Rav Moshe writes, Rav Moshe, remember, if you use the colors of Rav Moshe, you have to hit the chumras also, yeah? So Rav Moshe says that when you're taking deluxe Scrabble, and you're putting it into the groove, setting it, it's in a place, he wants to madama, that's the Magen Avraham that we mentioned before, about putting the letters on the Paroiches. Which would mean deluxe Scrabble is a problem, regular Scrabble is okay, but we have another problem. And for here we have to come on to Yankela's bananagram, which is, what about Shema Yichtov? There's often a gzeira, the Rambam brings it many, many times, about a game that's normally associated with writing. Are we worried that on Shabbos, obviously says nobody does that on Shabbos, you're right. But every gzeira is if you do it during the week, we're worried that you can do it on Shabbos. But Mela, if I normally write with Scrabble the scores on the weekday, are we going to be geyser on Shabbos that you're not allowed to play it? Shema, you're going to come to write on Shabbos Kodesh. So there's a Magen Avraham, Rabbi say. I'm sorry, there's a Chai Adam. The Chai Adam brings in Klal Lamed Ches Yud Aleph, look it up. He wants to say any game that is associated normally with writing would be asa on Shabbos Kodesh. Why? Because you're going to come to write. So I saw this Chai Adam, I'm like, whoa, we're answering many, many games on Shabbos. So you go check the Mishabura. What is the Mishabura? What does he say? So the Heilige Chofetz Chaim doesn't say a word. We don't say a word about this in the Chofetz Chaim. So I went, at the time I was learning Hilchos Shabbos, I went to my two Rebbes in Hilchos Shabbos and in many other inyanim. Went to Hagoyin HaGadol, Rabbi Zriel Orbach, Shlita, and I went to Hagoyin HaGadol, Rav Falk Zatzal, and I asked both of them, I said, look, Mr. Burr doesn't bring it. If the Mr. Burr doesn't bring the Chai Odom, must be that the Mr. Burr didn't hold of the Chai Odom, so it's mutter. They both told me the same thing. There's absolutely no raya. Just because the Mr. Burr doesn't bring it, doesn't mean he has to bring every Chai Odom. Doesn't mean he doesn't hold of it. So according to them, they would hold that would be also to play any game that is associated with writing, because there's a Gzeir Shem Yirtov. So Yankel Elamaisa said, bananagram will be mutter according to everyone. Why? Because nobody writes, right? Whatever this is. Then nobody writes on bananagram, so it's okay. Scrabble, on the other hand, Shimon says that he does write. So according to the Chaya Odom and according to other poskim, it could be also not because of Ksiva, because of Gzeir Shema Yichtov, but again, according to Rav Moshe, the regular Scrabble, and again, Rav Moshe didn't bring the Gzeir Shema Yichtov. That means Rav Moshe held it was obviously mutter, except for deluxe Scrabble, which is a problem of Ksiva in that case. So Rabbi Say, that is pre-existing letters. Now, what about, for example, what we said about the Mogen Avraham? How does that apply Locha Lamaisa? So if you've ever seen, they have these magnetic boards, and on these magnetic boards, you place Aleph base, or you place ABC, and you can write letters there, and people maybe do it on the fridge, right? People on the fridge is magnetic often, and you have these ABC or Aleph base letters, and you can, the kids, or maybe the husband is telling his wife what time to meet him in shul in the morning, meet me at this kiddush, whatever, and he wants to do that. According to what we've just said, Lefi the Mogen Avraham, which is Halacha Lamaisa, Mishabura Paskins this way, Shulchan Aruch Paskins this way, and that is that if you're giving something a backing, that is an Issa Ksiva, again, obviously Midrabanon, because it's Einem Iskayim, which would mean that it will be Asa to place those magnetic letters on the magnetic board or on the fridge in the form of, just to place them there would be problematic, and of course to make them into some kind of word as well, which means a person has to be very careful, again, unless it has a backing. That means if the Aleph base or the ABC magnetic tile has a backing, it's like a square, and on that is printed the letter, then obviously there's no problem. But if it's a cut out 3D A, cut out 3D B, then you have a problem of putting it on the fridge or problem on the magnetic board. By the way, also common shaila. People ask, right? They buy these chocolate letters, right? You can buy in the stores, these chocolate A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And then you make yourself a beautiful cake. You have the icing. Shaila came in one Shabbos that they wanted to place the happy birthday, whatever it was, on the cake or not, right? On the icing. Is that mutter, is that asa? According to the Mogen Avraham, which again, Mishabur Paskins Halacha Lamaisa, to take a 3D cut out letter and place it on the icing on Shabbos would be asa. Even though we've said from the Gemara in Shabbos Kuf Dalet that placing letters together that are pre-existing are okay, but here giving it a backing. Once you're giving it a backing, it's automatically problematic. So you have to be careful with that sugya. We're not going to have time now, but what I want to get to tomorrow, Beis Hashem, is another sugya within this sugya, and that is what happens if you're not dealing with letters that are pre-made, but you're dealing with a picture or an image which is cut. Can I place that together? Is that mucham, or is that the same what we've announced? Mitzvah Hashem. Tomorrow we'll go to the halachas. Have an amazing day.